Lots of measuring and penetrations done. So I just got this one kind of mocked up. Do a small L foot, larger tilt leg, even larger tilt leg, which is already connected here. So the goal is going to be to get this back panel realistically about flush with this wall, and then we kind of switch some things up. But initially, my design was going to be to do like 4 panels 5 times to get those 20 panels. And the real calculation was based on we're overusing for that 16K system for various reasons. But I needed about another 5K. 5 kilowatt solar system should zero me out. So we're gonna do 20 like this, right? And then my friend who's a solar guy came over and he said, what about this? Let's do, rather than doing them long, like portrait style, lamb down landscape, do 3 wide by 3 by 3 by 3, but do all of that on essentially kind of like a ground mount. Do all of that on a one level plane. Because the other thing we're running into, right, if I'm going to do panels and then panels and then panels and then panels, they all might start to shade each other. But so I have to space them out more so they don't shade the row behind it. So if I put them all on one plane, there's no way they can be shaded. But that'll only give me 12. So then over here, I'm still going to figure out what I'm going to do in front of those. I may do another big plane. I could do potentially maybe 12 more panels, but that's going to be pretty tight. So I may set up to do 9, but I've only got 8 left. So I need to get one more panel. So a lot of figuring, but I'll show you these real quick. The whole jam here was getting finding the studs. Once we found the studs, we're making a plan to lay rail, 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 rail. So these 2 rails will hold one row of panels. These 2 rails will hold one row of panels. These 2 rails will hold one row of panels. So we measured all that out, put in these fast jack parts with this seal pod attachment, so there's no chance of roof leaks. That was my biggest fear up here, was making myself some roof leaks, because water does sort of puddle, and I just freshened up this roof to get ready for this, because once I put the panels in the way, I'm not going to be able to really recoat this roof. So it's all recoated and the seal pods are in. When I get ready to do another seal pod, I'll walk you through. But it was really hot and I wasn't feeling like trying to videotape. We're just trying to slam this out in the morning. So we got these up. I got some more work to do. And I'm going to start laying the rails and doing some of the racking. Alright, real quick, because I'm burning up out here. I've got the racking all set for this particular array. It's all these. These I was laying across because I was using them as a straight edge to get the racks all level, the rails. So you can see on the bottom one, I went with, get my shadow out of there, I went with just an L foot. Man, really tough. Just an L foot and attached to the rail. Same on the bottoms. It was mid one. I went with the smaller tilt leg and an L foot, and then this front one, the longer tilt leg and an L foot. And so just with that minimal adjustability, there's more than enough adjustment to be able to get all these landed and tight, and they're level this direction and they're all sloped equally this direction. So in theory, water should hit and sheet off pretty well. I backed them up pretty close to this wall. The reason I did that, this is north. So this whole northern edge of the panel, we want facing south. And because they're going to be up high and the sun's going to be over here, the further they are this way, the less likely they are to get any shading. Now I could sneak them towards the south, but then I'm running into potentially that shading caused by the palm tree, or also caused by this partial wall, like the stub or pony wall. So I'm gonna back everything up this way as much as I can. Right now I just got everything tight and leveled, and it's all where I want it. And then I just landed these grounding lugs on here. So because the panels are self-grounding using the clamps, I just really need to ground this rail, because there's going to be a panel here which will ground that rail. And then once again I'll ground this rail, and the panel here will link the ground to this rail, and then that first rail will link it to this rail. So I really only have to nail 3 ground points. And then the next step is going to be I will need to have a junction box. I will most likely put the junction box on the rail. The purpose of the junction box is going to be to bring in this wire I have laid out right here is the PV wire. So the PV wire from the panels, they connect to each other in series, and then the first one will have either a negative or a positive, and the last one in the string will have a negative or positive. I need to pick those up, bring them over here, get them in the junction box, also bring the ground into the junction box. And at that point, it transfers over from, it's going to be a hard, rigid ground. It's going to transfer over to more like a green, multi-strand, flexible ground, and it's also going to transfer over to just regular number 10 non-PV wire. And a conduit will leave that junction box and go down. So I just happened to throw those PV wires down there and hook them up because I wanted to see if I could get the inverter to fire up. So these are just laid and hooked up to do an experiment. I don't think I have enough of them to get a high enough voltage to fire the inverter off, and I don't want to lay a whole bunch more out here flat, not bolted down. I really don't feel like it's super safe. So I'm going to disconnect these. I'm going to actually put something over top of them to take the voltage down, and then disconnect them rather than just trying to do it under 40 volts in series, so a couple hundred volts. And then I can actually just leave them aside until I do the ground, do the junction box, pre-run the PV wire. Then I can actually start popping these panels up. I'm not sure how much more I'll do today, because I'm actually I'm at work, but I'm not at work. I'm in like a professional development meetings, so I'm on my phone. I have to stop once in a while, answer questions. Mostly I've got my earphones in and I'm listening, so I may or may not be super productive, but I'm gonna at least keep trying. Alright, weekend's finally here, and I'm back up on the roof. So check out what I'm doing. I got the special zip tie. I'm gonna clip it right here on this panel. This panel's not bolted down, it's just hanging there. And then I'm just gonna loop it right here, and then in a second I'll explain exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay, I'm kind of like getting the slack where I want it. Easier said than shown. Alright, so just for a second right there. So I'm up here. I've got a couple rows of panels laid. I'm starting a third row. They're really easy to lay, but one of the things you got to worry about is making sure these cables aren't going to be flopping all over. So they make these zip ties that go into the center, these little holes on the panel. So they have kind of like a clip, and you find a hole that makes sense, like I did there, and that way I can pull the slack from the previous panel into the current panel and make sure the wires are not going to be hanging. And if you look from here, you can see everything's kind of up into the array. Nothing's going to be laying down on the roof. And so I'm just going to get ready on the next one. Pull this next one over here, and then I go grab another panel. So that's one aspect of it. Another one, when I got all the racking leveled, and then you have to plan out where the PV wire is going to be. So basically, that's my first panel. It's going to go this way, this way, this way. The last row is going to go this way. So the other end of the string is going to be right here. So I'll need just a very small piece of PV wire. So it's basically a PV wire from the beginning panel and a PV wire from the end. One becomes the positive, one becomes the negative, and those wires will go I'm a little ahead of myself because I'm gonna have some help from an electrician. He's better at conduit, so I just shot this 1-inch EMT up here roughly, and I'm gonna do the wiring on the panels, which will come to the junction box, and I can finish that up, and then he and I can knock out the wires from the inverter to the junction box and make the connections pretty easy. Although it's very backwards. If you were doing this more logically, you would not want to connect any of these panels until you had all your junction box work done. Because understand, these panels, if they're in the sun, they're going to be energized. And by the time you put them all in series, you're just up in the voltage. It's going to be 400 volts or 500, 600 volts. But the electrical stuff that he's going to help me with, he's really good at that. And it's Saturday, and I'm going to slam all this out so he can come over on Sunday. That's the only days available. So I'm going to do a little backwards. So we'll wire it all up, and then I'll leave it in the box, and then I'll actually come out here at night, and I'll make my final connections when all these panels are obviously not producing anything, which means I'll be wearing a flashlight. But no big deal. So you can see I got them pretty nice and level. Got these end clamps. Got these mid clamps. So the key is really the first row, and I measured off to the wall and made sure I liked it nice and square. And then it's just really just button the panel up to the next one. So that one's not bolted down, but that's okay. I'm gonna grab another panel from the pile, lay it roughly in place, get it roughly where it goes, make the connections, do the zip ties, and then I'll go through and slide in the mid clamps, get them squared up, and then tighten them down, and then I can again start on the next row. And so it's really not rocket science once you get to this point. So continue. So as you can see, I just added this row. So what I'm gonna do right now is my next set of mid clamps. So obviously they're going to be mid because they're going to be between the two panels. So the mid clamps connect two panels. So I'm going to rip these open and kind of pre-assemble them, and I'll just lay them up here. And then I'll come back through and I'll connect all the wires, and then I'll zip tie or put them in the wire holders, and then that one will be good. And then I can come over here, lay the next panel, lay the next panel, lay the next panel, get them in the clamps, close them down, lay the connections, zip tie them up out of the way. At this point, it's really just a routine. I may choose to leave this last panel off because, again, the junction box is going to be here. It'd be dumb to put the junction box anywhere other than under the panel, so I intend to put it under the panel. That way it's just more protected from the sun and the rain. So worst case, if I just do 2 more panels, maybe I bring this other panel over here and, test fit it, and then just take it out of the way. That way it's easier to make the connections final. So nice and easy. And a shocking turn of events. The inverter that I got from a friend for free is junk. So it was this one. This is the 7K. When I got it all hooked up, there's a little yellow LED over here. Kind of shows up like right here. And after I finally got it wired, first off, it wouldn't power up because I didn't have enough voltage, so I needed to put like at least 5 or 6 panels in series before it would even try. And then it was flashing this solid 5 seconds, off 3 seconds, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I looked that up in the service manual. That's just an internal inverter fault. So this thing's a big heavy beast. I yanked it off the wall. He had a couple others, so I just shot this 6K up right now. And in a way, I like the 6K better. It's a little newer. It's actually got the AFCI, the arc fault protection. It's a lot lighter, but he had 3 of the 7Ks, so I figured, if I could use a 7 and one ever went bad, I could have a spare 7. He only has one 6, so if the 6 works, I'm going to run it. Right now, this is something kind of funny that I'm learning. I probably really shouldn't power this up. So first off, if you're in any way doubting what you do, don't power your inverter up like this. But I'm playing Swaptronics here. I want to make sure I get a good inverter before I run all these wires in the conduit. When I turn on my breaker, it takes 3 minutes for this Generac smart module contact, and that's set by default because if the power goes out, we want this to be off for a certain amount of time, and then you can have up to 9 or 10 of these, and one at a time they'll power on to not all of a sudden blast that generator with, the huge amperage surge of a motor starting. So this one's going to take a little while to start up, but it's in startup mode with the light flashing. And then this is kind of mad at me because it's saying there's no grid voltage, 0 hertz. It hasn't produced any kilowatt hours today or total, so it's just mad because there's no grid voltage. So even though I have a breaker on, voltage is being interrupted right there. When that sucker finally clicks over, click, boom, then it'll send it in. The DC disconnect switch is turned on. I can see my grid, my panel PV voltage is like 425, I think, and I did measure that down here. So when I powered off this DC disconnect, I did verify I've got 425 volts coming in, but I don't have 425 here, so I knew I was safe to pull the inverter. But now I'm powered on. This baby's live, so I don't typically run it without the cover. But one of the problems with these old Sunny Boys is this screen is so yellowed, I actually couldn't see the words on there, so I'm doing what I'm gonna do. So in a second, I'll know what I got. That's what I get for doing freebie inverters. It's really saving me about $1,000. Okay, that was the Generac Smart Module kicking on. So now that that's a solid light, this is actually powering up. There we go. We got just about 60 hertz. So it's gonna probably take a while for the inverter to actually power up. So I'll pause it. Now it sees the line voltage, 122 and 122. So it's doing its thing. It's producing 0. See this green LED right here? Maybe barely see it. That flashing means it's boot up. So it is booting. It's in waiting mode. Should be getting close. And I did on another inverter deal that I got. I'm always doing squirrely crap. I had one of these capacitors blown out, fluid all over the inside of it, so it's really not safe to stand here with this cover off, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to pause again, take a step back, wait for this thing to start making some noise, and see if it starts making kilowatts. I'm waiting a while. This thing takes 5 minutes, they say. See that LED flashing. Here we go. Start to hear it do some things. There we go. Something clicking. The relays or whatever. Yeah, sweet. I'm not making a whole lot right now, 1400 watts. But it's later in the day. So I don't expect to make a lot. I'm gonna look at that number one more time. Yeah, so 1400 watts. But the sun is, it's like 5 o'clock, so the sun starts to get a little low here. And it's not really hitting at the ideal angle, but the array is right here facing south. So this one works, which is sweet. I don't know exactly how many watts it'll make in peak, but at least I know this inverter is good. So I can power it down, I'll do the DC disconnect, I'll shut the breaker off, and then I'll actually properly run the wires and conduit and everything, and I no longer have to stress about wondering if the inverter is good or bad. That's kind of the problem for me. Was the only reason I would do this is because I had to deal with the guy to get an inverter, and it was already a week that I had this one that was junk, And if it takes me another couple weeks to get all the conduit and everything all buttoned up, and then next thing you know we don't have a very good deal anymore, I'd be out the inverter. So making it happen without spending a ton of money. All right, we just filled this one, so we're gonna fill them like all these other ones. You ready? Here comes the goopy, and it's old. You can still see it's nice. All right, it's gonna run. Good. Move on. So we just fill it, right? So this goop right here would, if there's any, slight little leaks or holes, or if it flexes over time in the wind and stuff, that stuff stays semi-liquid. So it just provides a great seal. So there's a lot of different, personally I think that just pumping the M1 into the hole would probably be good, but this is the procedure per the manufacturer to fill these pods with the pourable sealant. That happens to be the big bag. So we're gonna fill all these, and then we'll have everything all full. And then the next step is we're gonna build up the stanchions, or like the tilt legs. So we gotta open these, mount this lower bracket directly into that hole, mount this bracket into that hole, put this tall leg into this one, put the short leg into that one, and then the angle can change a little bit. And we're just trying to get a little bit of slope on these panels so the water runs off. And you can see it's got plenty of slope. This one's got plenty of slope, so that way it doesn't end up with water spots. And then, like I said, I'm gonna talk with a friend about those panels. So if I get a killer deal, I'm gonna have to get 6 more of the standoffs, which are fast jack, and then they're combined with the chemlink sealing pods. So if I get the right deal on the panels, that's what I'll do. I'll do 6 more. I'll do 3 more panels, which will take 6 more kits, the standoffs and the bowl sealant and everything. So I'd have to get some more. And then if I was going to do that for this shading, what I'd probably do is I'd probably actually take that small leg, move the small leg down here so it brings this up a little bit, and it would be a little bit less steep. But because it brings the panels up, it'll make the shading shorter, right? So this is gonna, depending on the time of year, this is gonna cast a shadow. In the winter, it's gonna cast a long shadow. In the summer, it's gonna cast a short shadow, which it is, you can see. So the goal is, even in the winter, for the shadow to miss the panels. The higher the panels are, the more it'll miss the shadow. But there's a calculation using geometry that's a little outside of my area of expertise, so we're doing it approximate. But if I don't get a deal, then we're good. I land the last, all these panels, I cut these rails off, and I leave like a nice 4 or 5 feet of space, and that'd be fine. So, not super technical, but it takes a little time. Okay, so as you can see, I got a little squeezed for time. Notice this is all wet. So we got a pretty big rainstorm in the forecast all of a sudden, so the focus went away from doing cool video to slamming this out while I had penetrations in the roof. And as you can see, this roof is very well sealed now, but there is ponding that does happen here in the low spots, so I really couldn't risk not having all this stuff sealed really well. But happy to report no leaks, no problems, nothing down inside the garage. But let's do a quick walk around here. So you can see nice clean lines. That hard EMT comes up, becomes that LB, kind of does a little flex into the box. The box is nice and recessed under the panels. You can see this is all clean under here. A little bit of tape dangling, I guess, but no low-hanging wires. So all the wires are tied up nice. Same with this one. What I ended up doing was I obtained 4 more They're actually 320 watt panels. So because I got a good deal on those, all of a sudden, boom, I just said, you know what, I'm going to do another 12. So I ended up doing 24 panels here rather than 21. So it turned out sweet. Had to do some calculations regarding the angle right here, and that has to do with the sun, making sure I don't get shading. So this is, it's triangular, it's geometry. This is A, this would be your right angle right here, this is B, and then you'd know this angle here because you can look up the tilt of the sun in the winter, and then that can determine basically, because B is fixed, you can calculate C. That'll help you determine A if you can figure those other three angles based on the tilt of the sun. It's kind of a weird formula, but this is how much space I needed here, and I didn't need as much here because the difference between the panel and this panel, the height difference, that B leg wasn't as great, so the A leg didn't need to be as great. Same angle, tilt angle of the sun. So it turned out, I think, really good. I did a few days of production before we got the rain, about almost 30K, about 30 kilowatt hours a day. So I'm doing 130 a day basically between this and that. So I should be pretty good. But get a good, check it out, good. I definitely feel good about the way these seal pods work, because they're, the hole is sealed and then the pod is sealed down and then it's all filled, in case, it flexes in the wind or whatever. It seems really good. So, the assembly is pretty simple. Nuts and bolts, and we're just racking stuff. You can see like the end clamps on the end, the mid clamps in the mid, that clamp two at a time, lining them up, making sure they're square. It's not really that tough, to be honest, especially on the flat roof. Was nice and easy and safe. So that is gonna sum up this video. Not exactly an extensive how to do all the steps, but at least give you a pretty good idea of what's got to happen.